The scream of metal tearing through ice cut through the blizzard like a death knell. Cora Hastings pressed her face against the frosted window of her cabin, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the semi-truck jackknife across the highway 300 yards away. The vehicle flipped once, twice, then slammed onto its side in an explosion of snow and debris. For a moment, everything went silent except for the howling wind that shook her small Montana refuge to its foundation. She should have stayed inside. Any sane person would have. But Cora had stopped being sane the day she ran from her pack 5 years ago, and she damn sure wasn't going to start now. Welcome to the story of how a discarded Omega became the most feared queen in shifter history. This is the tale of Cora Hastings, the woman they laughed at, the wolf they threw away, the soul they broke. And this is how she made every single one of them kneel. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. Hit that like button and stay until the very end, because what happens next will shake you to your core. The wind hit Cora like a freight train the moment she stepped outside. 20 below zero, maybe colder. The kind of cold that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground and made every breath feel like swallowing glass. She pulled her parka tighter, the fur-lined hood doing little against the Montana winter that had buried the landscape in white death for 3 days straight. Her boots crunched through 2 feet of powder as she made her way toward the overturned truck. The blizzard had transformed the world into a whiteout. She could barely see 10 feet ahead, but she'd grown up in these mountains. She knew how to move through them, how to survive when everything else died. The wildlife rescue station she'd built with her own hands stood behind her, a squat log structure that had become her entire world. No neighbors for 40 miles. No pack, no family. Just her, the animals she saved, and the ghost that haunted her sleep. Exactly how she wanted it. Stupid, she muttered to herself, fighting through a snowdrift. Stupid, stupid, stupid. But even as she said it, she kept moving, because that was who Cora Hastings was. The woman who ran toward disaster when everyone else ran away. The same instinct that had gotten her cast out of her pack. The same bleeding heart that had nearly gotten her killed a dozen times over. The truck loomed ahead, its undercarriage exposed like the belly of a wounded beast. The trailer had split open, and even from here she could hear something inside. Not the groan of settling metal. Howling. Cora's blood went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Wolves. Her wolf stirred inside her for the first time in weeks, pressing against her consciousness with an urgency that made her stumble. She'd been suppressing her shifter nature for so long that feeling it now was like touching a live wire. Wrong. Dangerous. A reminder of everything she'd left behind. She reached the wreckage and grabbed the twisted metal of the trailer door, yanking with strength that shouldn't have belonged to someone her size. The door screamed in protest but gave way, revealing the horror inside. Cages. Dozens of them, stacked too high, each one containing a massive wolf. Oh my God, Cora breathed. These weren't ordinary wolves. Even trapped and terrified, she could see the intelligence in their eyes, the size that marked them as shifters. 25 of them, maybe more, all in their animal forms. Some bleeding from where the crash had thrown them against the bars. Others perfectly still in a way that might have been death or might have been shock. And the smell, silver, acrid and burning, the scent of the one metal that could hurt their kind. Each wolf wore a thick collar around its neck, crude and industrial, suppressing their ability to shift back to human form. What the hell is this? Cora's voice cracked. She'd heard rumors, whispers in the shifter underground about trafficking operations, about wolves being captured and sold to the highest bidder. Fight rings. Experiments. Slavery dressed up in contracts and corporate paperwork. But seeing it in front of her, feeling the pain radiating from these caged creatures, it made her stomach turn. One of the wolves, a massive black beast with eyes like molten silver, locked its gaze on her. Even wounded, even trapped, there was something in that stare that made Cora's wolf whimper and press low. Power. Authority. The kind of presence that made you want to bare your throat and submit before your conscious mind even registered the threat. She looked away before she did something stupid like actually submit to a caged animal. Okay, she said, more to herself than to them. Okay, think. You can't leave them here. The storm's getting worse. They'll freeze to death and you'll have 25 dead shifters on your conscience. Not that anyone would miss them. Not that anyone would even know. The thought came unbidden and bitter. Because that was the truth of their world, wasn't it? Shifters who disappeared did so quietly. Pax looked the other way. The human authorities knew better than to ask questions. And people like Cora, Omega wolves with no family, no status, no power, they vanished all the time and nobody gave a damn. She grabbed the first cage, testing its weight. Heavy, but manageable. The wolf inside, a gray female with amber eyes, snarled, snapping at the bars. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about this either, Cora muttered. It took her 4 trips to get the first 5 cages from the wreckage to her barn. Her muscles screamed in protest, her lungs burning from the cold and exertion. The wind tried to knock her down with every step, the snow already covering her tracks as fast as she made them. Halfway through the 6th cage, her grip slipped. She went down hard, the metal corner of the cage slamming into her ribs with enough force to crack bone. Pain exploded through her side, white-hot and blinding. She lay there in the snow, gasping, waiting for her shifter healing to kick in and dull the agony to something manageable. The wolf in the cage, a russet male with scars across his muzzle, watched her with what might have been concern or might have been hunger. Hard to tell with the blood loss making her vision swim. Get up, she told herself. Get up, Cora. They're dying. She got up. By the time she dragged the last cage into the barn, her entire body was numb. Not just from the cold, but from exhaustion so complete that her hands shook too badly to close the barn door. She managed it eventually, shutting out the blizzard and plunging the space into relative quiet. 25 pairs of eyes watched her from their cages. 25 wolves, all of them bigger and stronger than her even in their weakened state. All of them with those silver collars burning into their necks, keeping them trapped in forms that couldn't speak, couldn't plead, couldn't do anything but watch as she collapsed against a hay bale and tried to remember how to breathe. I'm an idiot, Cora said to the barn at large. You know that, right? Complete idiot. The black wolf, the one with the silver eyes, made a sound low in its throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Something in between that raised the hair on the back of her neck. She forced herself to stand, to move to the workbench where she kept her veterinary supplies. Most of it was meant for the foxes and deer she rehabilitated, but she had heavy-duty bolt cutters somewhere. If she could get those collars off. The barn door exploded inward. Cora spun, her hand going to the hunting knife at her belt. A pathetic defense against what stood in the doorway, but the only one she had. 3 men in tactical gear, assault rifles raised, faces hidden behind masks and goggles. The lead one swept the barn with his weapon, the laser sight painting red dots across the caged wolves before settling on Cora's chest. Step away from the merchandise, he said, his voice distorted by a communications device. Merchandise. The word hit Cora like a slap. These weren't people to them, not even animals, just products. Inventory. Things to be bought and sold and used up until there was nothing left. These are living beings, Cora said, surprised by how steady her voice came out. You can't just... Lady, I don't give a shit what you think they are. The man took a step forward. That truck was transporting military assets under federal contract. You're interfering with government property. Government property, Cora repeated. Her laugh came out harsh and broken. You're trafficking shifters and calling it government work? Last warning, step away. The black wolf's growl filled the barn, low and resonant and absolutely terrifying. The kind of sound that vibrated in your bones and made your hindbrain scream at you to run. The other wolves joined in, a chorus of rage that made the men hesitate despite their weapons. Cora made her choice. She'd been making the same choice her whole life, really. The choice that had gotten her exiled from her pack, that had left her alone and hunted and barely surviving in the Montana wilderness. The choice to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, even when it cost her everything. Her hand closed around the bolt cutters. No, she said simply. Then she moved. The first collar came off the black wolf in a spray of sparks and the screech of breaking metal. Cora didn't wait to see what happened next. She was already moving to the next cage, to the gray female, yanking the bolt cutters with every ounce of strength she possessed. Behind her, she heard the gunfire start. But she also heard something else. The sound of cages breaking open from the inside, of massive bodies hitting the ground, of growls turning into roars that shook dust from the rafters. And above it all, a voice, deep and commanding and absolutely inhuman. Kill them all! The barn became a slaughterhouse. Cora kept her head down, kept cutting collars, even as the screaming started, even as the wet sounds of tearing flesh and breaking bones filled the air around her, even as warm blood sprayed across her back and something heavy hit the ground next to her with a thud that made her teeth rattle. She didn't look. Couldn't look. If she looked, she'd freeze. If she froze, she'd die. Another collar, another cage, another wolf freed to join the carnage. When silence finally fell, Cora was on her knees in front of the last cage, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work the bolt cutters. The wolf inside, a small brown female who couldn't have been more than a juvenile, pressed against the bars, whimpering. "It's okay," Cora whispered. "It's okay. I've got you." The collar came free. Cora dropped the bolt cutters and slumped forward, her forehead resting against the cage. Every muscle in her body felt like it had been set on fire. Her ribs screamed where the cage had hit her. Her hands were bleeding from a dozen cuts she didn't remember getting. But they were free. All of them. A shadow fell over her. Cora looked up slowly, knowing what she'd see before she saw it. The black wolf stood above her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its body, could smell the blood matting its fur. Not its own blood. The men who'd come to reclaim their merchandise were scattered across the barn floor in pieces that would probably give Cora nightmares for the rest of her life. Up close, the wolf was even more massive than she'd realized. It stood nearly 5 feet at the shoulder, its frame packed with muscle that spoke of power and violence. Those silver eyes studied her with an intensity that made her wolf curl up small and terrified inside her mind. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to run. She stayed perfectly still instead, meeting that ancient gaze despite every fiber of her being telling her to look away, to submit, to show throat. "You're welcome," Cora said quietly. The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth that could snap her spine like kindling. For a moment she thought it might actually kill her, just another mess to be cleaned up, another witness to be eliminated. Then it did something that shocked her more than violence would have. It lowered its head and pressed its muzzle against her shoulder in a gesture that was almost gentle. The contact sent a jolt through Cora's entire body, electricity arcing along her nerves in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with something she didn't want to acknowledge. Her wolf rose up suddenly, slamming against her consciousness with desperate intensity, and for the first time in 5 years, Cora felt the bond try to snap into place. "Mate, no." She scrambled backward, putting distance between herself and the wolf, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might actually break through her ribs. "No," she said aloud. "No, no, no, not happening, not a chance." The wolf watched her retreat with what might have been amusement in those silver eyes. Then, slowly, deliberately, it began to change. The shift was wrong. Cora had seen hundreds of shifts in her life, smooth transitions from wolf to human that took seconds at most. This was nothing like that. This was painful, the wolf's body fighting against silver poisoning and exhaustion and injuries that should have been fatal. But when it was done, when the last of the fur receded and the bones settled into their human configuration, Cora found herself staring at a man who looked like he'd been carved from violence itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in scars that spoke of battles fought and won against impossible odds, dark hair matted with blood and sweat, and those eyes, still silver, still burning with that terrible ancient power that made her want to run and submit and bare her throat all at once. He was also completely naked, but Cora's brain had apparently decided that was the least shocking thing about this situation. "You have 3 seconds to explain," he said, his voice rough from disuse but carrying absolute authority, "why I shouldn't kill you where you stand." Cora's laugh came out slightly hysterical. "I just saved your life." "You freed me from a cage I allowed myself to be put in. There's a difference." He took a step toward her, and Cora was suddenly painfully aware of how small the barn had become. "Who sent you? The Silver Pines Pack, the Council, one of the Southern Territories trying to make a play?" "I don't know what any of that means." Cora backed up until her shoulders hit the wall. "I saw a truck crash. I found wolves in cages. I did what anyone with a soul would do. Anyone with a soul would have called the authorities." Another step. "Anyone with a soul would have stayed in their warm cabin and let nature take its course." He was close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in those silver eyes, could feel his breath on her face. You're either brave or stupid, little Omega. I haven't decided which. How about grateful? Cora shot back, fear sharpening her tongue. I saved you and your entire pack from freezing to death in a blizzard, and all I get is threats? My pack? He actually laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Look around you, girl. These aren't my pack. Cora glanced at the other wolves, who had stayed in their animal forms, watching the exchange with varying degrees of interest and wariness. Then who are they? Prisoners, soldiers, enemies I've collected over the years who made the mistake of crossing me. His hand shot out faster than she could track, closing around her throat. Not squeezing, not yet, but the threat was clear. I am Silas Montgomery, king of the Lycon territories, and you, little Omega, have just made the biggest mistake of your short, insignificant life. Cora's vision started to narrow at the edges, her wolf thrashing in panic. She should submit. Every instinct bred into her over 24 years of being an Omega screamed at her to bare her throat, to go limp, to accept whatever this alpha decided to do with her. Instead, she brought her knee up hard between his legs. Silas grunted, his grip loosening just enough for Cora to wrench free. She dove for the barn door, hitting it with her shoulder hard enough to slam it open, and ran out into the blizzard. The storm had gotten worse. Visibility was down to maybe 5 feet, the wind strong enough to nearly knock her off her feet. She didn't care. She ran anyway, her boots slipping on ice, her lungs screaming as she sucked in air so cold it felt like drowning. Behind her, she heard them coming. Not just Silas. All of them. 25 wolves hunting her through the storm, and she had nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Nothing but open snow and mountains that would kill her just as surely as they would. Cora's foot caught on something buried under the snow. She went down hard, skidding across ice, and when she tried to get up, her ankle gave out with a pain that made stars explode across her vision. Sprained, maybe broken, definitely not going to hold her weight. The wolves circled her, shadows in the white, their eyes reflecting what little light penetrated the blizzard. Cora dragged herself backward through the snow until her back hit something solid, a boulder maybe, or a fallen tree. She pulled her knife again, knowing how useless it was, but needing to feel something solid in her hand. "Come on, then!" she screamed at them. "Come on! You want to kill me? Do it! I'm right here!" The black wolf, Silas, stepped out of the circle, moving with a predator's grace despite the wounds he'd sustained. He shifted as he walked, the transition smooth this time, and by the time he reached her, he was human again. Still naked, still terrifying, still looking at her like she was a problem he needed to solve. "You really are stupid," he said, crouching down to her level. "Running from a king, attacking me, thinking you could escape." He reached out and Cora flinched, but he only brushed snow from her hair with surprising gentleness. "Or maybe you're exactly what I thought. Brave." "I'm not your enemy," Cora managed through chattering teeth. "I didn't know who you were. I just wanted to help." "I know." Silas studied her face like he was memorizing it. "I can smell the truth on you, little Omega. You really did save us out of the goodness of your heart." He leaned in closer, his nose nearly touching hers. "But that doesn't change what you are." "And what's that?" "Mine." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Cora didn't want to examine. Her wolf surged up again, and this time Cora couldn't push her back down. The bond tried to snap into place again. That terrible recognition that she'd spent 5 years running from, that had destroyed her life once already. "No," she whispered. "Yes." Silas's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Do you feel it? The pull? The recognition?" His eyes had started to glow, that silver light intensifying until it was nearly blinding. "You're my mate, Cora Hastings, my fated mate, and now that I've found you, I'm never letting you go." Cora's world tilted sideways. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not after everything she'd sacrificed to escape the bonds of pack and fate and destiny. "I don't want this," she said, hating how weak her voice sounded. "I know." Silas scooped her up in his arms like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his bare chest despite the freezing temperature. "But that doesn't matter. Not anymore." He carried her back toward the cabin while his wolves followed, and Cora was too exhausted, too cold, too overwhelmed to fight. She let her head rest against his shoulder and tried not to think about what morning would bring. Tried not to think about the fact that she'd just saved the most dangerous shifter in North America. Tried not to think about the mate bond trying to sink its claws into her heart. Tried not to think about how, for the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel quite so alone. The storm raged around them, but inside the circle of Silas's arms, Cora felt almost warm, almost safe, almost like she'd finally come home. And that terrified her more than anything else that had happened tonight, because Cora Hastings knew better than anyone, home was just another word for a cage. And cages, no matter how beautiful, were still prisons. She'd escaped one pack already. She had a sinking feeling that escaping a Lycan King would be impossible, but she'd try anyway. Because that was who she was. The woman who fought even when fighting was futile. The Omega who ran even when running meant death. The soul who chose freedom over safety every single time, even if it killed her. Especially if it killed her. The barn door closed behind them, shutting out the storm, but not the reality of what came next. 25 wolves, 1 Omega, and a fated mate bond that threatened to destroy everything Cora had built. The night was far from over, and something told Cora that before dawn broke her entire world would change forever. She just didn't know yet whether that change would save her or damn her. Time would tell. And in the Montana wilderness, time had a way of running out when you needed it most. The warmth of the cabin hit Cora like a physical force after the brutal cold of the storm. Silas set her down on the worn couch near the wood stove, his hands lingering on her shoulders for a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. The other wolves had filed in behind them, shifting back to human form one by one. And suddenly, Cora's small sanctuary was filled with 25 naked strangers who looked at her with varying degrees of suspicion, curiosity, and hostility. She grabbed the stack of blankets from the storage chest and started throwing them at the nearest bodies, not making eye contact with anyone. Her ankle throbbed where she twisted it, and her ribs still screamed from where the cage had slammed into them hours ago. Every breath hurt. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through her system, but she stayed on her feet because sitting down felt like surrender. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on?" demanded a tall man with copper hair and scars across his chest. His voice carried the rasp of someone who'd spent too long screaming. One minute we're being transported to a black site. The next some Omega is cutting our collars off, while Montgomery gives the order to paint the walls with our guards. "Marcus." Silas's voice cut through the murmur of voices like a blade. "Sit down. Shut up. I'll explain when I'm ready." Marcus sat. They all did, sinking onto the floor or leaning against walls, wrapping themselves in Cora's blankets while their king stood in the center of the room like violence given form. Cora tried to slip toward the hallway, toward her bedroom, where she could lock the door and pretend this nightmare wasn't happening. Silas caught her wrist without even looking at her. "You stay," he said quietly. "We need to talk." "I don't need to do anything." Cora yanked her arm free, ignoring the way her wolf whimpered at the loss of contact. "This is my home. You want to have your pack meeting or war council or whatever this is? Fine. Do it somewhere else. This isn't a request. And I'm not one of your subjects." She met his eyes, saw the flash of surprise there that she'd dare challenge him. "You said it yourself. I'm just some stupid Omega who made a mistake. So let me go hide in my room and lick my wounds, and you can figure out your next move without me." Silas studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her shock, he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just found something interesting to play with. "You really don't know who I am, do you? You told me. Silas Montgomery, Lycan King, big scary alpha who threatens helpless women." Cora crossed her arms despite the pain in her ribs. "Missing anything?" "Just the part where helpless women don't talk back to me." He moved closer, invading her space deliberately. "The part where questioning my authority gets you exiled at best, executed at worst. The part where every shifter in North America knows my reputation and acts accordingly." "Well, I'm not from North America originally," Cora lied smoothly, "so your reputation doesn't mean shit to me." Behind Silas, several of the wolves made sounds that might have been shocked laughter or might have been horror. A woman with ice-blue eyes and white blonde hair leaned forward, her attention fixed on Cora with laser intensity. "She's lying," the woman said flatly. "I can smell it on her. She knows exactly who you are, Montgomery. She's just too stubborn or too stupid to care." Cora's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten about enhanced shifter senses. Forgotten that these weren't just any wolves, but clearly soldiers or warriors who'd been trained to detect deception. Interesting. Silas tilted his head, studying Cora like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. "So you do know who I am. You knew when you freed me, knew when you ran, knew when you attacked me." His hand came up to cup her jaw, forcing her to meet his gaze. "And you did it anyway. Why?" "Because you were dying," Cora said, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. "All of you. I could feel it. The silver poisoning, the cold, the injuries. You wouldn't have lasted another hour in that storm." She jerked her chin free of his grip. "I don't care if you're a king or a psychopath or the devil himself. I wasn't going to let you die in cages like animals." Silence fell over the room, thick and heavy. Then Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and disbelieving. "She really is insane. Montgomery, where did you find this one?" "I didn't." Silas hadn't taken his eyes off Cora. "She found me." "And what are you going to do with her?" asked the blonde woman. "We can't just leave her here. She's seen too much, knows too much. She's a liability." "Vera has a point," added another wolf, this one dark-skinned with eyes like chips of amber. "The people who took us, they're not going to stop looking. And when they find this place, they'll find her. She's a witness. They'll kill her to cover their tracks." Cora's blood went cold. She'd been so focused on surviving the immediate crisis that she hadn't thought about what came after, about the men in tactical gear who'd called the wolves merchandise and government property, about whatever shadowy organization could coordinate the capture and transport of 25 shifters without anyone noticing or caring. "I can handle myself," she said, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. "No," Silas said simply. "You can't. You're an Omega with no pack, no protection, and no idea what kind of enemies you just made." He turned to address the room. "Here's what's going to happen. We stay here until the storm clears. We treat our wounded, gather our strength, and figure out who orchestrated this little trafficking operation." His gaze swung back to Cora. "And she comes with us when we leave." "Absolutely not." Cora took a step back, her wolf rising up in panic. "I'm not going anywhere with you people. This is my home, my life. You don't get to just—" "Your life ended the moment you cut those collars," Silas interrupted. "You're marked now. Every enemy I have will be looking for you. Every organization that profits from shifter trafficking will want you dead for interfering with their operation. You stay here, you die. Probably slowly, definitely painfully. Then I'll run. I've done it before." "Where?" Vera challenged, her ice-blue eyes cold. "Where exactly do you think you can run that we won't find you? That they won't find you?" She stood, the blanket falling away to reveal a body covered in scars that spoke of battles survived against impossible odds. "You freed the Lycon King, little Omega. That makes you interesting, valuable, a target. And targets don't get to hide." Cora wanted to scream, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. She'd been trying to help, had risked her life to save theirs, and now they were telling her she had no choice but to abandon everything she'd built? "I need air," she muttered, limping toward the door. Silas caught her elbow. "You go out there. You freeze to death. Maybe that's better than the alternative." She shook him off and grabbed her parka from the hook, ignoring the spike of pain in her ribs. "Don't follow me." She made it 3 steps outside before the cold stole her breath. The blizzard had intensified, the wind strong enough to physically push her backward. But Cora kept moving, kept putting distance between herself and the cabin, between herself and the impossible choice they were forcing on her. The barn loomed ahead, dark and silent, except for the wind howling through gaps in the wood. Cora slipped inside, closing the door against the storm, and leaned against it as her legs finally gave out. She'd escaped the Silver Pines pack 5 years ago, by sheer luck and determination, had built this life from nothing, the cabin, the rescue station, the carefully constructed isolation that kept her safe from pack politics and mate bonds and all the ways her wolf nature had tried to destroy her. And now, in one night, it was all falling apart. I thought I told you not to follow me, Cora said, without looking up. You did. Silas's voice came from somewhere to her left. I don't take orders well. Clearly. She finally raised her head, finding him leaning against one of the empty cages, now fully dressed in clothes he must have taken from her storage. They were too small for his frame, the shirt stretching across his shoulders, but at least he was covered. What do you want? To understand you. He moved closer, his footsteps silent despite the concrete floor. You're terrified of me. I can smell it, but you don't submit, don't back down. Don't show throat even when every instinct you have is screaming at you to do exactly that. He crouched down in front of her, bringing his eyes level with hers. Why? Because submission gets you killed, Cora said flatly. Maybe not right away. Maybe it takes years, but eventually, when you've given away every piece of yourself, when you've bent and broken and shaped yourself into what they need you to be, eventually they destroy you anyway. Understanding flickered across Silas's face. You were part of a pack. They hurt you. They did what packs do to Omegas who don't know their place. Cora's laugh came out bitter and broken. I was 17 when I presented. Sweet, obedient, everything an Omega should be. And then I made the mistake of falling in love with the Alpha heir. Let me guess, Silas said quietly. He used you, promised you forever, then threw you away when someone more useful came along. Close. Cora met his eyes, letting him see the old pain there. He loved me, really loved me. But love doesn't matter when politics and power are on the line. His father arranged a marriage to the daughter of a neighboring pack. Declan, that was his name. He tried to fight it, tried to choose me. She closed her eyes, the memory sharp enough to cut. So they beat him until he submitted, made him watch while they... She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The silence said enough. And then they exiled you, Silas finished. Told me if I ever came back they'd kill me. That I was a stain on pack honor. A temptation that needed to be removed. Cora opened her eyes, unsurprised to find them wet. I've been running ever since. 5 years of hiding, of suppressing my wolf, of building a life where I don't need anyone and no one needs me. Silas was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. Then he did something that shocked her. He reached out and gently wiped away the tear tracking down her cheek. The mate bond, he said softly. You felt it snap into place. That's why you ran. Why you're so afraid. I'm not afraid of you. No. You're afraid of what I represent. Connection, belonging, the possibility that someone might actually choose you and mean it. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I terrify you because you want this bond as much as you fear it. Cora jerked her head away from his touch. Don't presume to know what I want. I don't have to presume. I can feel it. Silas tapped his chest, right over his heart. The bond doesn't lie, Cora. And right now, it's screaming at me to protect you, to claim you, to never let you out of my sight again. Then fight it. She pushed to her feet, ignoring the protest from her ankle. I didn't ask for this. Didn't want it. I'm not going to be some prize you won because fate decided we should be together. Good. Silas stood as well, towering over her. Because I don't want a prize. I want a partner. Someone strong enough to stand beside me, not behind me. He caught her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. And whether you like it or not, you're already involved in something much bigger than your little refuge here. The organization that captured us. They're part of a network that's been trafficking shifters for decades. Military contractors, pharmaceutical companies, fight rings. They take our kind and use us up until there's nothing left. And you're going to stop them, Cora said flatly. I'm going to burn them to the ground. His eyes flashed silver. But I need information first. Need to know who's funding them, who's protecting them, how deep this goes. He released her chin. That's why we were in those cages. My wolves and I let ourselves be captured so we could infiltrate the operation from the inside. Cora stared at him. You let yourself be collared with silver? Trapped in cages? Transported like animals? Information is worth any price. Silas's expression hardened. I've spent 3 years tracking this network. 3 years watching shifters disappear while the council sits on their hands and the packs look the other way. This was my chance to see the operation firsthand, to get close enough to the people in charge to take them apart piece by piece. and then I ruined it by freeing you. You saved 25 lives, he corrected. The mission was already compromised. We would have been killed at whatever facility they were taking us to. I could smell it on the guards, fear and anticipation. They knew what was waiting for us. He moved to the barn window, staring out at the storm. You didn't ruin anything. You gave us a fighting chance. Cora didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the fact that this terrifying Alpha King had deliberately put himself and his wolves in mortal danger for information. That he'd endured silver poisoning and torture and the very real possibility of death because he cared about shifters he'd never met. Why? She asked quietly. Why do you care? You're a king. You have territories, subjects, power. What do random trafficked wolves matter to you? Silas turned to face her, and for the first time she saw something in his expression that looked almost like pain. Because I was one of them, he said simply. 20 years ago, before I was king, before I had power or status or anything except rage and a will to survive. I was merchandise too. The confession hung in the air between them. They took me when I was 14, Silas continued, his voice flat and emotionless in a way that made the words hit harder. Ripped me away from my family, threw me in a cage and sold me to a fight ring in the South. Spent 4 years learning how to kill or be killed for the entertainment of humans and shifters who paid to watch children tear each other apart. How did you escape? I didn't. His smile was sharp enough to cut. I won. Every fight, every challenge, every attempt to break me. And when I'd killed everyone they threw at me, when I'd proven myself too valuable to waste in the ring, they sold me to someone worse. He moved back toward her, each step deliberate. A pharmaceutical company that wanted to study shifter genetics. See what made us different, what made us strong. Cora's stomach turned. They experimented on you. For 3 years. Tested our healing, our strength, our ability to shift under various conditions. Silver poisoning, starvation, isolation. He stopped in front of her. I survived because I was too stubborn to die and too angry to give up. And when I finally got free, when I killed everyone in that facility and burned it to the ground, I made myself a promise. That you'd never let it happen to anyone else. That I'd hunt down every person involved in that trade and make them pay in blood and screaming. The silver in his eyes intensified. I took the Lycan throne by force 10 years ago specifically so I'd have the resources and authority to wage this war. And I won't stop until every cage is empty and every trafficker is dead. Cora understood then. Understood the scars she'd seen on his body, the violence that radiated from him like heat, the absolute conviction in his voice when he talked about burning the network to the ground. This wasn't just a mission for him. It was vengeance, justice, the kind of single-minded purpose that could drive someone to let themselves be captured and collared just for a chance to strike back. The wolves in those cages, she said slowly, they're not your pack, they're volunteers, all of them. Silas's expression softened slightly. Warriors who've survived their own hells, who want to make sure no one else goes through what we did. Marcus was in a breeding program. Vera survived 6 years in a combat testing facility. Every single one of them has reasons to hate the traffickers as much as I do. And you're their king. I'm their weapon. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture that was almost tender. Which brings us back to you. I told you I'm not— You're coming with us, Silas interrupted. Not because I'm ordering you, not because of the mate bond, but because you have skills we need. At her confused look, he gestured around the barn. This is a wildlife rescue operation. You've got medical supplies, rehabilitation equipment, experience treating injured animals. We're going to need all of that if we're going to keep saving trafficked shifters. Cora blinked. You want me to be your medic? I want you to help us build something better than cages and laboratories. A place where rescued shifters can heal, recover, learn to trust again. His hand cupped her face. I want you to do what you do here. Save lives, but on a scale that actually matters. That's not fair, Cora whispered. You can't just— I'm not asking you to accept the mate bond. Not asking you to submit or follow or do anything except what you're already doing. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. I'm offering you a choice, Cora. Come with us and help save others like yourself. Or stay here and wait for the traffickers to find you. That's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. No, an ultimatum would be me throwing you over my shoulder and carrying you out of here whether you agree or not. He leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. This is me giving you the respect of making your own decision. Take your time. Think it through. But know that when dawn comes and the storm clears, we're leaving. And I'd really prefer you came willingly. Then he was gone, slipping out the barn door and back into the storm, leaving Cora alone with her thoughts and the weight of an impossible decision. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold concrete, her mind racing. Everything Silas had said made terrible sense. The traffickers would come looking for their lost merchandise. They'd find her cabin eventually, find evidence that someone had freed the wolves, and then they'd make her disappear, just like they'd disappeared countless others. But going with Silas meant accepting the mate bond, accepting a connection she'd spent 5 years running from, accepting that her carefully constructed isolation was over. More than that, it meant going back into the world, back to pack politics and shifter territories, and all the violence and cruelty that came with their nature. Cora pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, and let herself cry for the first time since she'd escaped the Silver Pines pack. She cried for the girl she'd been at 17, full of hope and love and stupid dreams. She cried for the woman she'd become, broken and scarred and so tired of running. And she cried for the future she'd tried to build here, the peace she'd found in isolation, the safety that was about to be ripped away whether she wanted it or not. When the tears finally stopped, Cora wiped her eyes and made her decision. She'd go with them. Not because Silas demanded it, not because the mate bond pulled at her with increasing intensity, but because he was right. She could help, could use her skills to save others, could maybe, possibly, find some kind of purpose beyond just surviving. And if that meant facing her fears, confronting her past, and learning to trust again? Well, she'd survived worse. Cora pushed to her feet and made her way back to the cabin, the storm starting to ease as the worst of the blizzard moved past. Dawn was still hours away, but the sky had begun to lighten slightly, that pre-dawn glow that promised morning would come eventually. She found Silas standing on her porch, his arms crossed, watching the horizon like he was waiting for an attack that could come from any direction. "I'll go," Cora said without preamble. "I'll help you save the others, but I have conditions." He turned to face her, one eyebrow raised, bold for someone with no leverage. "You said you wanted a partner, not a prize. Partners negotiate." She climbed the porch steps, ignoring the pain in her ankle. "First condition, you don't force the mate bond. We take things slow. Get to know each other like normal people instead of letting instinct and fate decide for us." "Agreed." "Second, I maintain my own space, my own room, my own boundaries. You don't get to claim me just because we're working together." "Agreed." "Third, if I decide this isn't working, if I want to leave, you let me go. No hunting, no tracking, no forcing me to stay." Silas was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes searching her face. Then he nodded slowly. "Agreed. But know that I'll spend every day between now and then proving to you that leaving would be a mistake." "You can try." Cora held out her hand. "Deal?" He took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he pulled her close, his free hand sliding around her waist. "Deal. But Cora, I'm going to win. I'm going to make you mine in every way that matters. And when I do, when you finally accept the bond, it won't be because I forced you. It'll be because you chose me." Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft or sweet or any of the things a first kiss should be. It was claiming and possessive and absolutely devastating, his mouth moving against hers with a certainty that made her knees weak and her wolf howl with approval. Cora should have pulled away, should have enforced her boundaries, maintained her distance, reminded him that she'd just said no to the mate bond. Instead, she kissed him back, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and she let herself fall into the sensation of being wanted, being claimed, being connected to someone who wasn't afraid of her strength or her scars or the walls she'd built around her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Silas rested his forehead against hers. "You're going to be the death of me," he murmured. "Good," Cora replied. "Maybe that'll teach you not to kidnap stubborn Omegas." His laugh was warm and genuine, transforming his face from terrifying to almost human. I didn't kidnap you. You agreed to come. Under duress. Under negotiated terms that you set. He kissed her again, softer this time. Thank you. For agreeing. For trusting me enough to try. Cora wanted to tell him she didn't trust him, that this was purely practical, that she was only doing this to survive. But that would have been a lie, and they'd both know it. So instead she just nodded and stepped back, putting distance between them before she did something stupid like accept the mate bond right here on her porch. We should get some sleep, she said. If we're leaving at dawn, we'll need our strength. Agreed. But Cora? Silas caught her hand as she moved toward the door. What I said earlier, about you being marked, about having enemies now, that wasn't meant to scare you. It was the truth, and I need you to understand what you're walking into. I know. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. I've been running from danger my whole life, Silas. Maybe it's time I stopped running and started fighting back. His smile was fierce and proud, and full of promises she wasn't ready to hear. That's my girl. Cora went inside before she could respond to that, before her wolf could surge up and demand they accept the bond and claim him right back. She made it to her bedroom, closed the door, and collapsed on the bed, every muscle in her body screaming in protest. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow she'd leave behind the only home she'd known in 5 years. Tomorrow she'd step into a war she didn't fully understand against enemies she couldn't see. But tonight? Tonight she was still Cora Hastings, the Omega who'd built a life from nothing and survived against all odds. And that Cora was exactly who Silas Montgomery needed her to be. She just hoped she was strong enough to become her. Outside, the storm finally broke, the wind dying down to a whisper, the snow easing to scattered flurries. Dawn would come in a few hours, bringing with it the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Cora closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that rest would be precious in the days ahead, knowing that she'd made a choice that would either save her or destroy her, and knowing, deep in her bones, that there was no going back now. The Lycon King had found his mate, and she'd agreed to stand beside him. Whatever happened next would shake the shifter world to its foundations. Cora just hoped she'd survive long enough to see it. Sleep never came. Cora lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of 25 wolves settling into her cabin like they owned it, listening to Silas's voice through the thin walls as he organized watches and discussed strategy with his warriors, listening to her own heartbeat, steady and sure despite the chaos her life had become in the span of a single night. When the first hint of dawn crept through her window, she gave up pretending and got dressed. Jeans, thermal layers, her heaviest boots. She packed light, a single backpack with clothes, her medical kit, and the photograph she kept hidden in her nightstand drawer. The only picture she had left from before. Her mother's face smiling back at her, frozen in time, forever young, forever gone. Cora tucked it into the inside pocket of her jacket and stepped out of her room. The cabin had transformed overnight. Maps covered her kitchen table, marked with symbols and notes she didn't understand. Weapons lay stacked against the wall. Guns, knives, equipment that looked military-grade and definitely illegal. The wolves had organized themselves into units, some sleeping in shifts while others stood guard at windows and doors. Vera looked up from where she was cleaning a rifle, her ice-blue eyes tracking Cora's movement across the room. You actually packed. I had money on you making a run for it. I don't run anymore, Cora said, surprised to find she meant it. Smart. Vera set the rifle aside and stood, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd been a warrior long before she'd been captured. Running just makes the hunt more fun for them. Silas emerged from Cora's bathroom, his hair wet from a shower he'd taken without asking permission. He'd found clothes that actually fit him, dark tactical pants and a black shirt that looked like they'd been pulled from the equipment stash. His silver eyes found Cora immediately, sweeping over her packed bag with approval. Ready? He asked simply. No. Cora moved to the kitchen, pouring herself coffee from the pot someone had made. But I don't think that matters. It matters. He joined her, standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. We can wait another day if you need more time to... We can't. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Just got word from our scouts. 3 black SUVs heading up the mountain road. Military contractors by the look of them. They'll be here within the hour. The room exploded into controlled chaos. Warriors grabbing weapons, checking ammunition, taking defensive positions. Silas's hand closed around Cora's arm, pulling her away from the window. How many? He demanded. At least 15 that we can see, Marcus reported. But there could be more. They're coming heavy. Assault rifles, body armor, the works. They're here for the wolves, Cora said, her voice steadier than she felt. They tracked them somehow. Or they tracked you. Vera was at the window now, peering through a gap in the curtains. You're the one who freed us. The one who killed their guards. They know someone helped us escape, and this is the only structure for 40 miles. Cora's stomach dropped. She'd brought this down on herself. On all of them. Silas must have sensed her spiraling thoughts because he gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. This isn't your fault. They would have come eventually. We just need to make sure they don't leave alive. 15 against 25, Marcus said. We've faced worse odds. Not in our condition. A wolf Cora didn't know, dark-skinned with tribal scars across his jaw, stepped forward. Half of us are still recovering from silver poisoning. We're weak, slow. If this turns into a prolonged fight, we lose. Then we don't let it become prolonged, Silas said coldly. We hit them hard and fast. No survivors. No evidence. We make this look like they got lost in the storm and never made it back. What about her? Vera jerked her chin toward Cora. She's a liability in a fight. No offense, Omega, but you're not trained for combat. Then I'll stay out of the way, Cora shot back. Give me a weapon and point me at something useful. Silas's smile was sharp and proud. Barn, there's a hunting rifle in the tack room. You know how to use it? I've been living alone in Montana for 5 years. What do you think? I think you're full of surprises. He kissed her forehead quickly, a gesture so casual and intimate it made Cora's breath catch. Stay in the barn. High ground if you can find it. If anyone gets past us and comes for you, I shoot them, Cora finished. I got it. The SUVs came faster than expected. Cora was barely settled into the barn loft, rifle loaded and braced against a hay bale, when she heard the engines. 3 vehicles, just like Marcus had said, pulling up in front of her cabin in a formation that spoke of military training and hostile intent. 15 men emerged, all of them armed, all of them moving with the efficiency of a team that had done this before. The leader, a tall man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, raised a megaphone. This is a federal operation, his voice boomed across the snow. We have reason to believe you're harboring stolen government property. Surrender the assets peacefully and no one needs to get hurt. Silence from the cabin. Cora's finger tightened on the trigger, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. From her vantage point, she could see everything. The contractors forming up, weapons raised, advancing on the cabin in a textbook assault pattern. She could also see Silas through the kitchen window, his expression calm and cold as he watched them come. Last warning, the leader called. Surrender the assets or we will take them by force. Silas's response was to shoot him through the megaphone. The man's head snapped back, the megaphone exploding in a spray of plastic and blood, and then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from the cabin, the windows shattering as Silas's wolves opened fire with precision that made it clear they'd been waiting for this. The contractors scattered, some diving behind their vehicles, others returning fire wildly, caught off guard by the ferocity of the response. Cora tracked movement through her scope, watching the battle unfold with a detachment that probably should have worried her. She'd never shot anyone before, never even considered it. But as she watched one of the contractors level his rifle at the cabin window where Marcus was firing from, watched him take aim at the wolf who'd survived a breeding program and years of torture, she didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger. The contractor went down, a red bloom spreading across his chest. Cora's stomach lurched, bile rising in her throat, but she forced it down and chambered another round. No time for guilt. No time for horror, just survival. Another contractor broke from cover, running toward the cabin's side entrance. Cora tracked him, led him slightly, and fired. He stumbled but didn't fall, body armor taking the round. She adjusted, aimed higher, and her second shot caught him in the throat. He went down gurgling. The battle was brutally one-sided. The contractors had numbers and equipment, but they were fighting shifters. Warriors who'd survived hells specifically designed to break them. Wolves who'd spent years learning to kill or be killed. And they were fighting on terrain they'd claimed as their own, defending something that mattered more than money or orders. Within 5 minutes, it was over. Cora lowered her rifle with shaking hands, staring at the carnage below. Bodies scattered in the snow, blood staining the pristine white in patterns that would probably haunt her dreams. The SUVs sat empty, engines still running, windows shattered by gunfire. "Clear!" Marcus called from the cabin. Cora climbed down from the loft on legs that felt like water, her entire body trembling with adrenaline crash. She'd killed 2 men, 2 human beings who'd probably had families, lives, people who would miss them. "Hey." Silas was there suddenly, pulling her against his chest, his hand cradling the back of her head. "Breathe, just breathe." "I killed them," Cora whispered against his shirt. "You protected your pack." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "That's what we do. We protect our own, no matter the cost." "I don't have a pack." "You do now." He pulled back enough to look at her face, his thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "The moment you freed us, the moment you agreed to come with me, you became pack, my pack, and we take care of our own." Before Cora could respond, Vera burst into the barn, her expression urgent. "We've got a problem. Found this on one of the bodies." She held up a radio, still crackling with static. A voice came through, cold and professional. "Alpha Team, report. What's your status?" Silas took the radio, his jaw tightening. "How long until backup arrives?" "They're already here," Marcus said from the doorway, his face grim. "Just spotted 2 helicopters inbound from the south. Military grade. We've got maybe 3 minutes." "We can't fight helicopters," the scarred wolf, Cora had learned his name was Chen, said flatly. "Not in open ground. They'll cut us to pieces." Silas was already moving, his mind clearly racing through options. "Cora, do you have a vehicle?" "Old truck in the shed. Hasn't been started in months. Get it running. Vera, Chen, grab whatever supplies we can carry. Marcus, rig the cabin to blow. I want nothing left for them to trace." His eyes found Cora's. "How well do you know these mountains?" "Better than anyone." She understood what he was asking. "There's an old mining road about 2 miles north. Rough terrain, but it'll get us down the mountain without using the main highway. Can your truck handle it?" "If we're lucky." Cora was already running for the shed, Silas matching her pace. "If we're not, we're walking." The truck was a rusted piece of shit that she'd bought for $500 and had been meaning to fix for 3 years. It took 2 tries to get the engine to turn over, black smoke belching from the exhaust. But it started. "Everyone in!" Silas roared. "Move, move, move!" 25 wolves piled into and onto the truck bed, weapons and supplies thrown in haphazardly. Cora slid behind the wheel, her hands shaking as she threw the transmission into gear. The truck lurched forward, engine screaming in protest, just as the helicopters crested the ridge. "Go!" Silas shouted from the passenger seat. Cora went. The truck bounced over rough terrain, barely holding together as she pushed it to speeds it was never meant to reach. Behind them, the cabin exploded in a fireball that lit up the dawn sky. Marcus's handiwork ensuring nothing remained but ash and questions. The helicopters pursued, their searchlights sweeping the ground, bullets chewing up snow and earth behind the fleeing truck. Cora jerked the wheel left, then right, following a path only she could see, using every trick she'd learned in 5 years of navigating these mountains. "There!" She pointed ahead where the ground dropped away into a steep ravine. "The mining road. It goes down through there. They can't follow in helicopters." "They'll land and pursue on foot," Vera called from the truck bed. "Then we make sure we're long gone before they can organize." Silas braced himself as Cora sent the truck careening down an incline that was more cliff than road. "How far to the nearest town?" 40 miles, but we can't go there. Too exposed." Cora fought the wheel as the truck skidded on ice. "There's an abandoned mining complex about 20 miles south. We can hole up there, regroup." "Do it." The truck barely made it. By the time they reached the mining complex, a collection of dilapidated buildings and rusted equipment slowly being reclaimed by the forest, the engine was making sounds that suggested it would never run again. Cora didn't care. They'd made it. They were alive. She killed the engine and slumped over the wheel, exhaustion crashing over her like a physical weight. They'd escaped, barely, but at what cost? Her cabin was gone. Her life was gone. Everything she'd built, destroyed in a single morning. Out, Silas ordered his wolves. Secure the perimeter. I want eyes on all approaches. Anyone sees anything that moves, you report immediately. The wolves dispersed with military efficiency, leaving Cora alone with Silas in the cab of her dying truck. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Don't. Cora's voice came out harsh. Don't apologize for something that's not your fault. It is my fault. His hand found hers on the steering wheel. I brought this down on you. My war. My enemies. You'd still have your home if I'd left you to die in those cages? Cora turned to face him. If I'd chosen safety over doing what was right? She laughed, the sound bitter. I've been choosing safety my whole life, Silas. Look where it got me. Alone, hiding, barely surviving. She squeezed his hand. Maybe it's time I chose something different. Before he could respond, Marcus appeared at the driver's side window, his expression urgent. We've got incoming. Single vehicle. Civilian truck, looks like. One occupant. Silas was out of the truck in an instant, weapon drawn. Cora followed, her legs protesting the movement, her entire body screaming for rest she couldn't afford. The truck that pulled into the complex was newer than hers, but not by much. When the driver's door opened, Cora's entire world tilted sideways. She knew that face. Would know it anywhere, even after 5 years. Declan Hayes, alpha heir of the Silver Pines pack. The man who'd promised to love her forever. The man who'd watched them beat her and done nothing. The man she'd spent 5 years running from. He looked older, harder. There was a new scar across his jaw, and his eyes held a coldness that hadn't been there when she'd known him. But it was definitely him. Hello, Cora, Declan said, his voice sending ice down her spine. Miss me? Silas moved between them immediately, his body language screaming threat. You have 3 seconds to explain why I shouldn't kill you where you stand. Because I'm not here for a fight. Declan raised his hands, showing he was unarmed. I'm here to collect what belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you, Silas growled. Cora does. Declan's eyes locked on her over Silas's shoulder. She's Silver Pines pack property. Exiled, yes, but still bound by pack law, which means her fate is mine to decide. The hell I am, Cora spat, her shock crystallizing into rage. You lost any claim to me the day you let them throw me out. I had no choice. You had every choice. She pushed past Silas, getting in Declan's face despite the fact that he was twice her size and radiating alpha dominance. You could have fought for me, could have chosen me over pack politics, but you didn't. You stood there and watched them destroy me, and you did nothing. I tried. Not hard enough. Cora's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from 5 years of suppressed rage finally finding a target. So whatever you think you're here for, whatever you think gives you the right to show up now, you can shove it. I'm not pack property. I'm not your Omega. I'm nothing to you. Declan's expression hardened. You don't get to decide that. Pack law is clear. You were exiled, not released, which means you're still bound to Silver Pines, still subject to our authority. She's Lycon now, Silas said, his voice dropping into registers that made every wolf in earshot shudder. She's under my protection, mine to protect, mine to claim. And if you think pack law gives you authority over my mate, you're even stupider than you look. The word mate hung in the air like a bomb. Declan's eyes widened, then narrowed with calculation. You haven't marked her, haven't completed the bond, which means your claim isn't legitimate. Yet, Silas corrected. My claim isn't legitimate yet. Give me a reason and I'll fix that right now. Stop. Cora stepped between them, her heart hammering. Both of you, just stop. I'm not a piece of property you get to fight over. She turned to Declan. How did you even find me? I've always known where you were. His smile was cruel. Did you really think I'd let you disappear completely? I've had trackers on you since the day you ran, waiting for the right moment to bring you home. Cora felt sick. 5 years. 5 years she'd thought she was free, thought she was safe, and all along he'd been watching, waiting. Why now? She demanded. Why come for me now? Because you've become interesting. Declan pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph that made her blood run cold. It was her, clearly visible in the barn loft, rifle raised, taking aim at the contractors. You killed federal agents. Helped the most wanted shifter in North America escape custody. You're not just some pathetic Omega anymore, Cora. You're valuable. To who? To people who matter. People who pay very well for information about the Lycan King and his operations. Declan's smile widened. See, when I realized you'd gotten tangled up with Montgomery, I made some calls, reached out to some contacts, and wouldn't you know it, there's a bounty on anyone who can deliver information about his network. Locations, numbers, plans. Understanding crashed over Cora like freezing water. You're working with the traffickers. I'm working with people who recognize opportunity when they see it. Declan pocketed his phone. The way I see it, you've got two choices. Come back to Silver Pines willingly, accept your place in the pack, and maybe I'll convince my father to be lenient about the whole murder thing. Or resist. Force me to take you by force, and spend whatever's left of your life in a cage making up for the revenue you cost my new business partners. Silas moved so fast, Cora didn't see it coming. One moment Declan was standing there smirking, the next he was on the ground with Silas's hand around his throat, silver claws extended and pressed against the pulse point. Third option, Silas said conversationally. I kill you here and now, scatter your body parts across the mountain, and make sure your pack knows exactly what happens to wolves who threaten what's mine. Kill me and you start a war, Declan choked out. Silver Pines isn't some minor pack you can push around, Montgomery. We've got alliances, resources. You kill an alpha heir, you'll have half the Western Territories calling for your head. Worth it. Silas, wait. Cora put her hand on his arm, feeling the tension thrumming through him. Let him go. Cora, let him go, she repeated. I need to hear this. I need to understand. She met Declan's eyes as Silas reluctantly released him. You're working with traffickers, selling out your own kind for money. How did you become this? Declan stood, rubbing his throat, his expression shifting to something almost regretful. I became what I needed to be to survive, just like you did. We're not so different, Cora. We're nothing alike. No? You ran from your pack, built a new life in isolation, and now you're shacking up with the most dangerous alpha in existence because it suits your survival. He straightened his jacket. I'm just doing the same thing, making alliances that benefit me, playing the game smarter than everyone else. The game? Cora's laugh was hollow. You're helping enslaved shifters, torture them, use them up and throw them away. That's not a game, Declan. That's evil. It's business. He moved back toward his truck, clearly done with the conversation. And business is about to get very good. See, I didn't come here alone. I came here to verify my information before I made the call. He pulled out his phone again. And now that I know for sure that you've thrown in with Montgomery, that you're harboring 25 escaped assets worth millions. He never finished the sentence. Cora moved on instinct, her hand finding the pistol at Silas's hip, raising it, and firing in one smooth motion. The bullet caught Declan in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard, blood spreading across the snow. You shot me, he gasped, genuine shock in his eyes. You actually shot me. Next one goes between your eyes, Cora said, her voice eerily calm despite her racing heart. Drop the phone. You won't kill me. You don't have it in you. Try me. She chambered another round. I killed 2 men this morning. What's one more? Declan stared at her for a long moment, seeing something in her expression that made his face go pale. Slowly, carefully, he set the phone on the ground and kicked it toward her. Marcus scooped it up, checking it quickly. No calls made. He was telling the truth. He came here to verify before reporting. Then we have a problem, Vera said grimly. He knows where we are, knows what we're planning. We can't let him leave. You can't keep me here forever, Declan said, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Silver Pines will come looking, and when they find out you're holding me, they'll what? Silas crouched down next to him. Start a war? Please do. I've been looking for an excuse to dismantle your pack for years. You've just handed me the perfect justification. Silas, Cora lowered the gun, exhaustion crashing over her. We can't kill him. If we do, everything he said is true. Silver Pines will come for us with everything they have. And if we let him go, he reports our location to his trafficker friends and we get swarmed by private armies, Silas countered. Either way, we're fighting a war. At least this way we choose the battlefield. Cora looked down at Declan, at the man who'd once promised to love her, who'd become something unrecognizable in the years since she'd left. Part of her wanted him dead, wanted to pull that trigger and put a bullet in the skull of everything he represented. But a bigger part, the part that had spent 5 years building a refuge for wounded creatures, couldn't do it. There's another option, she said slowly. We use him. Silas's eyes narrowed. Explain. He's got connections to the trafficking network. Access to information we need. What if we keep him alive, make him talk, use him to find out how deep this goes? Cora met Silas's gaze. You said you've been tracking this network for years. Here's your way in. A cooperative witness who knows where the bodies are buried. I'll never talk, Declan spat. You will. Vera's smile was cold and sharp. Trust me, everyone talks eventually. The sound of engines in the distance cut through the conversation, multiple vehicles closing fast. They found us, Chen reported from his position on the roof. At least 6 trucks. Military contractors. They're coming from all directions. Silas stood, his expression hardening into something that made Cora's wolf whimper and submit. This was the Lycan King, the warrior who'd survived torture and experimentation and built an empire from blood and bone. Take him inside, he ordered, gesturing to Declan. Chain him somewhere secure. If he tries to shift or escape, break his legs. He turned to his wolves. Everyone else, defensive positions. We hold this complex until nightfall, then we move under cover of darkness. There's too many of them, Marcus said. We're outnumbered 3-1 at least. Then we even the odds. Silas's smile was terrifying. Cora, how stable are these old mining structures? She understood immediately what he was asking. Not very. The support beams are rotted. It wouldn't take much to bring them down. Perfect. He was already moving, his warriors falling into formation around him. Set charges on the main buildings. We let them come in, surround us, think they've got us trapped. Then we collapse everything on top of them and disappear in the chaos. It was insane. Suicidal. The kind of plan that only worked in action movies and fever dreams. I'm in, Cora heard herself say. Silas turned to her, surprise flickering across his face. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. She checked the pistol, made sure she had spare magazines. Declan made it my fight when he decided to sell me out. The traffickers made it my fight when they came to my home. And you, she met his eyes, saw the mate bond pulling taut between them. You made it my fight when you kissed me and told me I was Pack. His expression softened for just a moment. Then he pulled her close and kissed her hard, possessive, claiming her in front of everyone. Stay alive, he murmured against her lips. Whatever happens, you stay alive. That's an order from your king. I don't take orders, Cora shot back, but I'll make you a deal. I stay alive if you do. Deal. Then there was no more time for words. The trucks were here, contractors pouring out with military precision, surrounding the complex. Cora found her position, a partially collapsed building with good sight lines and multiple escape routes, and waited. The world narrowed to the scope of her rifle, to the sound of her breathing, to the knowledge that in the next few minutes, everything would change. She'd made her choice. Chosen Silas over safety. Chosen Pack over isolation. Chosen to fight instead of run. Now she just had to survive long enough to see if that choice would save her or damn her. The first contractor stepped into her sight line. Cora steadied her breathing, placed her finger on the trigger, and prepared to defend the Pack she'd never wanted but couldn't imagine losing. The battle for her future was about to begin. And this time, she wasn't running. This time, she was going to stand and fight, even if it killed her. The first shot rang out before Cora could even exhale. It wasn't hers. Someone else had fired, one of the contractors advancing on the east side of the complex, nervous trigger finger sending a round into the rusted equipment near Marcus's position. The sound echoed across the abandoned mining site like a starting gun. Then everything erupted. Cora squeezed her trigger, watching through the scope as her target, a contractor moving toward the main building where Silas had set the charges, dropped mid-stride. She didn't wait to see if he stayed down. Already chambering another round, tracking the next threat, falling into a rhythm that felt disturbingly natural. Below her, Silas's wolves moved like shadows given teeth. They weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like the survivors they were, using every dirty trick, every brutal tactic learned in cages and laboratories in hell itself. Vera materialized behind two contractors, her blade opening throats before they could scream. Chen emerged from beneath a collapsed conveyor belt, his shifted form, half wolf, half human, something nightmarish in between, tearing through body armor like paper. But the contractors kept coming. For every one that fell, two more seemed to appear from the tree line. They had numbers, coordination, and enough firepower to level a small city. "Cora!" Silas's voice crackled through the radio Marcus had shoved in her hand before the fighting started. "The charges are set. On my mark, I need you to shoot the support beam at your 2 o'clock, the one holding up the conveyor system." She found it through her scope, a rusted metal beam that looked like it had been holding on by sheer stubbornness for the last 30 years. "That'll bring down half the structure." "That's the idea. When it falls, everyone moves to Rally Point Beta. You remember where that is?" The old mine entrance on the north side, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation and decades of neglect. "I remember." "Good girl." She could hear the smile in his voice even through the chaos. "See you on the other side." The radio went silent. Cora tracked her scope back to the contractors, taking out another one who'd gotten too close to Vera's position. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing was steady. Some distant part of her brain recognized that she should be terrified, should be curled up in a ball, having a breakdown about the people she was killing. But that part was buried under something sharper, something fierce and protective that had awakened the moment Silas called her pack. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was defending her people. And apparently, that made all the difference. "All units, fall back!" Silas's command cut through the battle noise. "Fall back now!" Cora saw the wolves disengage, melting back toward the north side of the complex with practiced efficiency. The contractors pressed forward, sensing victory, pouring into the center of the site where the largest building stood, right where Silas wanted them. "Now, Cora." She didn't hesitate. Shifted her aim to the support beam, took a breath, and fired. The beam didn't just break, it exploded in a shower of rust and metal shrapnel. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the conveyor system groaned, a sound like the earth itself crying out, and collapsed. The domino effect was spectacular and terrible. The conveyor crashed into the processing building, which buckled and fell sideways into the sorting facility, which triggered the charges Silas had set. The explosions ripped through the complex in sequence, each one perfectly timed to maximize destruction while giving the wolves clear escape routes. Cora was already moving, slinging her rifle and half-sliding down the deteriorating stairs of her perch. Dust and debris filled the air, making it nearly impossible to see. She stumbled over rubble, her ankle screaming in protest, and kept going because stopping meant dying. A hand grabbed her arm in the chaos. She spun, knife drawn, and nearly stabbed Silas in the throat. "Easy," he said, pulling her against him as another explosion rocked the complex. "I've got you." They ran together through the destruction, Silas shielding her with his body when falling debris got too close, Cora guiding him around structural hazards only she knew about from her years exploring these ruins. Behind them, she could hear screaming, men trapped under collapsed buildings, the wounded calling for help that wouldn't come. She forced herself not to think about it, not to feel it, just run. The mine entrance materialized out of the dust like salvation. Marcus stood at the threshold, weapon raised, covering their approach. One by one, the wolves emerged from the destruction, blood-covered but alive, dragging their wounded with them. "Everyone accounted for?" Silas demanded. "All present," Vera reported, appearing from deeper in the tunnel with Declan dragged along behind her, his hands zip-tied and a gag in his mouth. "Including our guest. He tried to run during the chaos, broke his nose when I caught him." "Good." Silas turned to Chen. "The contractors?" "At least half dead in the collapse. The rest scattered when the shooting stopped. They won't regroup before nightfall." Chen's expression was grim. "But they'll be back. With more men. Better weapons. They know we're here now. Then we make sure we're long gone before they return." Silas moved deeper into the tunnel, his hand finding Cora's and pulling her with him. "This mine, where does it go?" It's a whole network, Cora said, her mind racing. Tunnels running for miles under the mountain. Most of them are collapsed or flooded, but there are a few that still connect to old access points on the other side of the range. How far? 10 miles? Maybe 12? It'll take hours in the dark and it's dangerous. Cave-ins, bad air, sections that might give way if we're not careful. Better than facing another army above ground. Silas raised his voice so everyone could hear. We go through. Stay together, watch your footing, and if anyone sees structural instability, you call it out immediately. Understood? A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the tunnel. They moved in single file, those with the best night vision taking point and rear guard. Cora found herself in the middle of the pack, surrounded by warriors who'd started treating her presence as natural. Normal. Like she belonged there. It should have felt strange. Wrong. She'd spent 5 years avoiding exactly this, being part of a group, having people depend on her, depending on others in return. Instead, it felt like coming home. The tunnels were worse than Cora remembered. Water dripped constantly from the ceiling, creating pools that soaked through their boots and made every step treacherous. The air tasted like rust and decay, thick enough to make breathing feel like work. And the darkness, it was absolute in a way that surface darkness never was, pressing against them like a living thing. Tell me something, Silas said quietly from beside her. They'd been walking for over an hour, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional drip of water. Why did you really agree to come with me? Cora considered lying, considered giving him the practical answer about survival and necessity. But something about the darkness, the intimacy of their low voices in the tunnel, made honesty feel easier. Because I'm tired of being afraid, she said finally. I've spent 5 years hiding from my past, from my nature, from the possibility that someone might hurt me again. And I thought I was safe. Thought I'd built something that couldn't be taken away. She laughed softly. But safety is an illusion. The cabin, the isolation, the careful distance I kept from everyone. It didn't protect me. It just meant I was alone when danger finally found me anyway. And now? Now I'm still in danger, still running, still don't know if I'll survive the week. She glanced at him in the dim light of Marcus's flashlight ahead. But I'm not alone, and somehow that makes all the difference. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then his hand found hers in the darkness, fingers interlacing with a certainty that made her wolf purr. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad you chose us, chose this, even knowing what it cost you. Are you? Cora squeezed his hand. I've been nothing but trouble since you met me. Got you into firefights, cost you your infiltration mission, and now you're crawling through abandoned mines to escape armies that want us dead. Best 24 hours I've had in years, Silas said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. You're fierce, Cora. Brave. You don't back down even when every instinct tells you to run. That's exactly the kind of Luna the Lycan territories need. The word Luna hit her like cold water. I never agreed to that. Not yet. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But you will. Because underneath all that fear and resistance, you know we're meant for this. Meant for each other. Before Cora could respond, Vera's voice cut through from up ahead. We've got a problem. The tunnel had widened into a larger chamber, the ceiling soaring up into darkness. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the section of floor that had collapsed into what looked like a bottomless pit, with only a narrow ledge remaining around the edges. How stable is that ledge? Silas asked. Chen knelt at the edge, testing it carefully. It'll hold 1, maybe 2 people at a time. But we try to cross as a group and the whole thing goes. Then we go 1 at a time. Silas turned to his wolves. Lightest first, heaviest last. If the ledge starts to give way, whoever's crossing gets priority. Everyone else retreats back down the tunnel. It took almost 30 minutes to get everyone across. 30 minutes of holding their breath, of watching warriors who'd survived impossible odds inch along a crumbling ledge barely wider than their boots. Cora went somewhere in the middle, her heart in her throat the entire time, stones breaking away under her feet and disappearing into the darkness below. She'd almost made it when her injured ankle gave out. Cora pitched sideways, scrabbling for purchase on the wall, but her fingers found only wet rock that offered no grip. For a terrible moment she was falling, the darkness rushing up to swallow her. Then Silas's hand locked around her wrist, He'd crossed ahead of her, had been waiting on the safe side, and now he hauled her up with strength that shouldn't have been possible for someone who'd spent the last day fighting and running. "I've got you," he said, pulling her against his chest once she was on solid ground. "Always." Cora's legs were shaking, her whole body trembling with adrenaline. That was too close. "But you didn't fall." He kissed her forehead. "You never fall, do you, no matter how hard they try to push you?" She wanted to argue, to point out all the times she had fallen, had broken, had barely survived. But the way he looked at her, like she was strong instead of scared, brave instead of damaged, made her want to believe him, made her want to be the person he saw when he looked at her. The rest of the crossing went smoothly, even Declan making it across under Vera's none-too-gentle guidance. They continued deeper into the mountain, following Cora's increasingly uncertain directions as the tunnels branched and merged and branched again. "You're sure this is the right way?" Marcus asked after they'd been walking for another hour. 70% sure," Cora admitted. "It's been years since I explored this deep, but I remember there being an exit somewhere in this section." 70%, Vera muttered. "Great. We're trusting our lives to 70%. "You have a better idea?" Cora shot back. "Because I'm open to suggestions that don't involve going back the way we came or waiting here to die." Vera opened her mouth to respond, then froze. "Do you hear that?" Everyone stopped, straining to listen. At first, Cora heard nothing but the usual tunnel sounds, dripping water, the occasional groan of stressed rock. Then she caught it, a rhythmic sound, mechanical. "Drilling," Chen said grimly. "They're trying to reach us from above." "How far away?" Silas demanded. "Hard to tell. Sound travels weird down here. Could be 100 yards, could be a mile. Either way, they know we're in the tunnels." Silas's jaw tightened. "And they're trying to cut off our escape routes. We need to move faster." They picked up the pace, Cora leading them through increasingly narrow passages. Her ankle was screaming now, every step agony, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. Behind them, the drilling sound grew louder, closer. Then the tunnel opened into something unexpected, a worked chamber with modern equipment, LED lights strung along the walls and supplies stacked in careful organization. "What the hell is this?" Marcus breathed. Cora's blood went cold as she recognized the logo stamped on the supply crates. Meridian Solutions. The same name she'd seen on the tactical gear worn by the contractors. "It's a staging area," Silas said, moving through the space with predatory focus. "They've been using these tunnels to move trafficked shifters without being detected." He pulled open one of the crates, revealing silver collars identical to the ones they'd cut off in Cora's barn. "This is part of their network. The tunnels connect to extraction points across the region." "Which means they know we're here," Vera said. "This isn't just a random mine. It's their territory." As if on cue, lights blazed to life deeper in the tunnel system. Not the weak LED strings in this chamber. Industrial lighting that turned the darkness into harsh, glaring day. A voice echoed through speakers Cora hadn't noticed. "Silas Montgomery, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Surrender yourself and your wolves and we'll make your deaths quick. Resist and you'll wish we'd sold you to the fight rings." Silas's response was to shoot out the nearest speaker. "I've got a third option. Come down here and try to take us yourselves, you cowards." The lights cut out, plunging them back into darkness. Then the shooting started. Muzzle flashes lit up the tunnels like lightning, bullets ricocheting off stone walls with deadly unpredictability. Cora hit the ground behind a supply crate, returning fire blindly toward where she'd seen the flashes. This wasn't like the battle at the mining complex. This was close-quarters chaos where friend and foe were separated by darkness and luck. "Fall back," Silas roared. "Back the way we came." But the way they'd come was blocked now. More contractors pouring in from that direction, trapping them in the chamber. Cora's mind raced. They were surrounded, outnumbered, trapped in an enemy stronghold with limited ammunition and no escape route. Then she saw it. On the far wall, partially hidden behind stacked crates, a ventilation shaft. Too small for most adults, but not for someone Cora's size. "Silas!" She grabbed his arm, pulling him down beside her. "There, the vent!" He followed her gaze, understanding immediately. "Can you fit?" "I think so." "Where does it lead?" "I don't know, but it's a way out." Silas looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he turned to his wolves. Vera, Chen, cover fire on my mark. Everyone else, fall back to the vent. That's suicide, Marcus argued. We don't even know if it goes anywhere. It goes somewhere, Cora said with more confidence than she felt. Ventilation shafts always lead to the surface. It's how they kept air flowing through the mines. Then you go first. Silas grabbed her face, kissed her hard and fast. Find the exit. Come back with help if you can. And if you can't, I'm not leaving you. You are. His voice held absolute authority. Because someone needs to survive this to tell the story, to make sure the world knows what happened here, and that someone is you. Like hell. That's an order, Cora. He pushed her toward the vent. Go. Now. Before I have to make you. Cora wanted to argue, to fight, to refuse to abandon the pack she'd just found, but she could see in his eyes that he wasn't going to budge, and she could see something else too, fear, not for himself, but for her. He was giving her a chance to survive, the only chance any of them might have. I'll come back, she promised, with help, with an army if I have to. Just hold on. I always do. He kissed her again. Now go. Cora went. The vent was tight, claustrophobically so, the metal walls pressing against her shoulders as she army crawled through darkness. Behind her, she could hear the battle intensifying. Heard Silas shouting orders, Vera's wild laughter as she tore into enemies, the distinctive boom of Marcus's shotgun. Heard the sounds growing fainter as she crawled deeper into the ventilation system. The shaft branched, merged, turned at angles that made no sense. Cora followed her instincts and the faint current of air that suggested an opening somewhere ahead. Her ribs screamed where they'd been cracked, her ankle was on fire, and her hands were bleeding from scraping against rough metal. She kept going. Time lost meaning in the tight darkness. Could have been minutes or hours when Cora finally saw light ahead. Not artificial light, but the gray glow of approaching dawn filtering down from above. She emerged in a drainage culvert on the side of the mountain, miles from where they'd entered the mines. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene given what was happening underground. Cora dragged herself out of the culvert and collapsed on the snow, her entire body shaking. She'd made it. She was free. And Silas was still down there, fighting an army with dwindling ammunition and no escape route. She forced herself to stand, to take stock of her surroundings. She was on the eastern slope of the mountain, overlooking a valley she didn't recognize. No structures visible, no roads, just wilderness stretching to the horizon, and somewhere down there, civilization. Help. The possibility of mounting a rescue. Cora started walking, each step agony, driven by the knowledge that every minute she wasted was another minute Silas and his wolves spent fighting for their lives. She'd gone maybe half a mile when she heard the helicopter. Military grade. Coming from the south, heading directly toward the mountain. Cora dove for cover in the tree line, watching as it passed overhead. Not just one helicopter, 3 of them, all bearing the Meridian Solutions logo. Reinforcements. Her heart sank. Whatever was happening in those tunnels, it was about to get much worse. She had to move faster, had to find help before... The explosion ripped through the mountain. Cora felt it through the ground, a deep rumble that shook snow from branches and sent birds screaming into the sky. She watched in horror as a section of the mountainside collapsed, smoke and debris billowing up from what she knew were the mine entrances. No, she whispered. No, no, no. They'd blown the tunnels, brought down the entire network to bury Silas and his wolves alive. Cora sank to her knees in the snow, her mind refusing to process what she'd just witnessed. This couldn't be happening. She'd just found them, just accepted the bond, just started to believe that maybe, possibly, she could have something more than survival. And now they were gone, buried under tons of rock with no chance of rescue. She should cry, should scream, should do something other than kneel there in the snow like a statue. But all she felt was empty, hollow, like everything inside her had been scooped out and replaced with ice. Then she felt it, a pull, faint and distant but unmistakable. The mate bond. It was still there, stretched thin and weak, but present, which meant Silas was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he'd survived the collapse. Cora pushed to her feet, new determination flooding her veins. He was alive, which meant there was still a chance, still hope. She started running down the mountain, her damaged body protesting every step, and she didn't care, because she'd made a promise to come back with help, with an army if necessary. And Cora Hastings kept her promises. Even if it killed her, she just had to figure out how to raise an army when she had no pack, no resources, and no idea where to even start. The answer came to her as she crested a ridge and saw the town below. Small, remote. Probably not even on most maps. But towns had people. People had phones, and phones meant she could call in favors from the one pack connection she'd never quite severed. It was risky, dangerous, might end with her in chains or worse. But Silas needed her. The wolves who'd become her pack needed her. And for the first time in her life, Cora was ready to fight for what was hers. She picked up speed, racing down the mountain toward the town, toward help, toward a future that hung by the thinnest of threads. Behind her, the mountain smoldered. Ahead of her, possibility beckoned. And deep underground, connected to her by a bond that refused to break, Silas Montgomery fought to stay alive. Cora just had to reach him before time ran out. The race had begun, and this time she wasn't running away. She was running toward pack, toward purpose, toward the mate she'd tried so hard to resist and now couldn't imagine losing. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist, as Cora Hastings, Omega, Survivor, and nascent Luna prepared to do something she'd never done before. Fight back. With everything she had. And heaven help anyone who stood in her way. The town was called Blackridge, and it looked like hope wrapped in rusty metal siding and desperation. Cora hit Main Street at a dead run, her lungs burning, her vision swimming from exhaustion and pain. The few people out at this early hour scattered at the sight of her, wild-eyed, blood-covered, clearly running from or toward something terrible. She didn't stop until she reached the only place that mattered. The payphone outside the shuttered gas station, its cracked plastic shell somehow still intact despite looking like it hadn't been used since the 90s. Cora's hand shook as she dug quarters from her pocket, change she'd grabbed from her cabin in what felt like a lifetime ago. She fed them into the slot, punched in a number she'd memorized but never called, and waited. 3 rings. 4. Pick up, damn you, pick up. Yeah? The voice was rough, suspicious, exactly as she remembered. Eli, Cora's voice cracked. It's Cora. Cora Hastings. Silence on the other end, heavy and dangerous. Then, you've got some fucking nerve calling this number. I know, and I'm sorry, but I need help. Please. Silas Montgomery is trapped under a collapsed mine with 24 wolves, and if someone doesn't get them out in the next few hours, they're all going to die. More silence. Cora could practically hear Eli Graves thinking, calculating, weighing whether helping her was worth the risk. He'd been her one friend in the Silver Pines pack, the only wolf who'd tried to help her after the exile, who'd slipped her money and a burner phone and told her to run fast and far. Where are you? He asked finally. Blackridge, eastern Montana. There's a collapsed mine network about 4 miles northwest of here. Meridian Solutions has it locked down. Contractors, helicopters, the works? Meridian? Eli's voice sharpened. Jesus, Cora. What did you get yourself into? Long story. Can you help or not? I can't mobilize Silver Pines for this. Declan's father would have my head. But I know people, wolves who owe me favors. Give me 30 minutes. Oh, we don't have 30 minutes. Then make them. Eli paused. Cora, be careful. Whatever you're doing, whoever this Montgomery is to you, be careful. The people you're up against don't play by pack rules. I know. She gripped the phone tighter. That's why I'm going to beat them at their own game. She hung up before he could respond, before she could second-guess what she was about to do. The mate bond pulsed weakly in her chest, still there, still alive, but fading. She could feel Silas's pain through it, his exhaustion, the suffocating weight of earth and rock pressing down on him. He was fighting to stay conscious, fighting to keep his wolves alive in the darkness. Cora had to buy them time. She walked back toward the mountain, her mind racing through options and discarding them just as fast. She had no weapons, no backup, no plan beyond reaching the mine entrance and somehow preventing Meridian from finishing what they'd started. It was insane. Suicidal. Exactly the kind of stupid heroics that had gotten her exiled in the first place. She did it anyway. The mine site was exactly as bad as she'd feared. 3 helicopters on the ground, their rotors still spinning. At least 40 contractors in full tactical gear, organized into squads that were systematically searching the rubble. And at the center of it all, a man in an expensive suit that looked absurdly out of place in the Montana wilderness. Cora recognized him from photographs Silas had shown her in the brief moments they'd had to talk strategy. Lawrence Hendricks, CEO of Meridian Solutions. The man who'd built an empire on trafficked shifters and called it legitimate business. She was going to make him pay for every wolf he'd ever caged. But first, she had to not die. Cora approached the perimeter with her hands raised, making herself as visible and non-threatening as possible. The contractors saw her immediately, weapons snapping up, red dots painting her chest. "Don't shoot," she called out. "I'm unarmed. I just want to talk to Hendricks." The contractors exchanged glances, clearly unsure what to make of the blood-covered woman who'd just walked out of the forest. One of them spoke into a radio, listened to the response, then gestured for her to approach. They patted her down roughly, confiscating the knife she'd forgotten was still strapped to her ankle, then marched her toward Hendricks. Up close, he looked younger than his photographs suggested. Mid-40s, maybe, with the kind of polished appearance that came from expensive grooming and absolute confidence in his own superiority. His eyes tracked her approach with cool assessment. "Cora Hastings," he said, surprising her. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "You know who I am?" "Of course. You're the Omega who freed my property and cost me approximately $47 million in lost assets." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Declan Hayes has been very forthcoming about your history and your current association with Montgomery." Cora's blood ran cold. "Where's Declan?" "Safe, cooperative, currently providing us with very useful intelligence about Lycan operations." Hendricks tilted his head, studying her like she was a specimen under glass. "He suggested you might be valuable leverage, a way to convince Montgomery to surrender without forcing us to dig him out piece by piece." "Silas doesn't surrender. Everyone surrenders eventually, Miss Hastings. It's simply a matter of finding the right pressure point." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me, what would you give to save him? Your freedom, your life? How much is a mated bond worth when measured against certain death?" Cora met his eyes, saw the calculation there, the absolute certainty that he held all the power in this negotiation, and she made a choice that would either save them all or doom her completely. She smiled. "You're right," she said softly. "Everyone has a price. Everyone breaks eventually. But here's the thing. You don't understand about wolves like Silas Montgomery. They don't break the way you think they will." "Meaning?" "Meaning you've spent the last hour congratulating yourself on burying him alive, on cutting off his escape routes, on having him exactly where you want him." Cora's smile widened. "But you're not fighting a trapped animal. You're fighting the king who survived 4 years in your fight rings, who escaped your laboratories, who spent the last decade systematically destroying everything you've built. A king buried under a mountain is still just a corpse waiting to stop breathing," Hendricks said coldly. "Is he?" Cora tilted her head, listening to something only she could hear through the bond. "Because I can still feel him. Still feel all of them, actually. Still alive, still fighting. And you know what I think? Enlighten me. I think you collapsed those tunnels too fast. Didn't verify the kill. Didn't account for the fact that Silas has survived worse than some rocks and dirt." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I think he's down there right now, digging his way out. And when he reaches the surface, when he sees what you've done, what you've tried to do to his mate, he's going to tear you apart with his bare hands." Hendricks' expression flickered, just for a moment, but long enough for Cora to see the uncertainty there, the tiny seed of doubt. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Cora pulled at the mate bond, sending everything she had down the connection, her location, her danger, her absolute faith that Silas would come for her. "There's an easy way to find out. Keep me here. Wait. See what happens when—" The ground beneath their feet rumbled. Every contractor froze, weapons raised, staring at the collapsed mine entrance. The rumbling grew stronger, more violent, and then the rubble exploded outward. Silas emerged from the mountain like wrath-given form. He was covered in dust and blood, His clothes torn to shreds, his eyes blazing silver, bright enough to be seen even in the morning sun. Behind him, his wolves poured out of the opening they'd carved through solid rock, exhausted, wounded, but alive and absolutely furious. "Open fire!" Hendricks screamed. The contractors obeyed, bullets tearing through the air. But Silas and his wolves were already shifting, their human forms blurring into something faster, stronger, harder to kill. They moved through the gunfire like it was rain, closing the distance with supernatural speed. Cora felt hands grab her, Hendricks using her as a shield, a gun pressed to her temple. "Montgomery!" he shouted. "Call off your wolves or I paint the mountain with her brains." Silas stopped mid-stride, his shifted form, massive black wolf with those terrible silver eyes, locked on Cora. She could feel his rage through the bond, his desperate need to tear Hendricks apart, warring with the knowledge that one wrong move would kill her. "Let her go!" Silas's voice came out distorted, half human, half growl. "This is between us. She's not part of this." "She became part of this the moment she freed you." Hendricks pressed the gun harder against Cora's skull. "Now here's what's going to happen. You and your wolves are going to stand down, shift back, get on your knees. And maybe, I'll let her live." Cora could see Silas's wolves fanning out, trying to get a clear shot at Hendricks without hitting her. Could see the contractors forming up, weapons trained on the shifters. Could see this ending in a bloodbath that would kill everyone she'd come to care about. So she did the only thing she could think of. She let her wolf out. Not a shift. She didn't have time for that. But she let the power rise up, the Omega nature she'd spent 5 years suppressing, the strength that came from being the heart of a pack rather than its fist. It rolled out of her in waves, invisible but undeniable, hitting every shifter in range like a physical force. The contractors stumbled, their human minds unable to process the sudden pressure. But the wolves, they felt it in their bones, in their blood, in the deepest parts of their nature that responded to Omega commands. Even Silas's warriors, fierce and independent as they were, went still, dropped to their knees without conscious thought because an Omega had spoken and their wolves demanded obedience. But Cora wasn't commanding them. She was commanding Hendrix's attention, drawing every ounce of his focus onto her, making him see her as a threat instead of a hostage. It worked. Hendricks' grip loosened fractionally as his human mind struggled to understand what was happening. And in that fraction of a second, Cora moved. She dropped her weight, twisting out of his grip, and rolled away as the gun went off. The bullet meant for her head buried itself in the ground inches from where she'd been standing. Then Silas was there. He hit Hendricks like a freight train, his shifted form bowling the man over, jaws closing around the arm that held the gun. Bones crunched. Hendricks screamed. The weapon clattered away across the rocks. "Everyone freeze!" The new voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Cora looked up to see a convoy of vehicles pouring into the site, trucks bearing pack insignias from across the Western Territories. Wolves she didn't recognize piling out with weapons drawn, taking positions that surrounded Meridian's contractors. And at the head of them, surprisingly, was Eli Graves. "Eli," Cora managed. "Told you I knew people." He moved to stand beside her, his weapon trained on the nearest contractor. "Called in every favor I had. Turns out a lot of packs have lost wolves to Meridian over the years. They were very interested to hear that someone was finally making them pay." The contractors were outnumbered now, 3-1 at least. Their weapons lowered slowly as they realized the battle was over before it had really begun. Silas, still in his massive wolf form, stood over Hendricks with his jaws around the man's throat. One bite, and it would be over. "Silas." Cora moved to him slowly, her hand reaching out to touch his blood-matted fur. "Don't. He's not worth it." The wolf's eyes found hers, still blazing with killing fury. "Please," she whispered, "let him face justice, real justice. Let the world see what he's done. Don't make yourself into what they say you are." For a long moment, Silas didn't move. Then slowly, his jaws opened. He released Hendricks and stepped back, his form blurring and shifting until he stood human again, gloriously naked and absolutely terrifying despite the lack of claws and fur. "Cuff him," he said coldly. "Cuff all of them, and someone get Declan Hayes out here. He and I need to have a conversation about betrayal." The next few hours passed in controlled chaos. The arriving pack secured the site, disarming contractors and discovering exactly how extensive Meridian's operation was. The tunnels beneath the mountain weren't just transport routes. They were a full staging facility for trafficking operations across the entire region. Cora found herself in the back of a medical truck, getting her ribs wrapped and her ankle properly treated while she gave statements to what felt like a dozen different pack representatives. They all wanted to know the same things: how she'd found the trafficked wolves, how she'd survived the assault, how she'd managed to rally support so quickly. She answered truthfully but mechanically, her mind elsewhere, focused on the mate bond that had strengthened the moment Silas emerged from the mountain, focused on the knowledge that they'd survived against impossible odds, focused on what came next. Cora. Silas appeared in the truck's doorway, now dressed in borrowed clothes that actually fit. "We need to talk." The pack representatives scattered, sensing the tension, leaving them alone. "About?" Cora asked, though she knew. "About this." He gestured between them, the bond that sang in the space separating their bodies. "About what you did back there. The Omega power you unleashed. The way you commanded attention from every shifter in range." "I didn't mean to. You saved my life." Silas sat beside her on the truck's bench seat. "You could have run, should have run. I gave you an out, told you to escape, and instead you came back with an army." "I made a promise." Cora met his eyes. "I told you I'd come back with help. I keep my promises." "I know." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing with the certainty that was becoming familiar. "But it's more than that. You claimed me, Cora. When you pulled on the bond, when you let your Omega power rise, you were telling every wolf there that I was yours, that we were mated." "I didn't complete the bond," she said quietly. "Didn't let you mark me. That was the deal, remember? We take it slow." "Fuck slow." Silas pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I almost lost you today. Felt you in danger through the bond, and couldn't do anything about it because I was buried under a goddamn mountain. I'm not wasting any more time pretending this isn't exactly what we both want." "And what do we want?" "Each other, completely, permanently. No more conditions or negotiations or careful distance." His eyes blazed silver. "I want you as my Luna, as my mate, as my partner in everything that comes next. And I know you want that too." Cora wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the reasons this was a terrible idea, all the ways it could go wrong, all the history she carried that made trusting someone this much feel like suicide. But she was tired of running, tired of fear, tired of building walls around a heart that was meant to connect. "I want conditions," she said instead. Silas smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Name them." "I'm not giving up who I am to be your Luna. I'm still Cora, stubborn, damaged, prone to making impulsive decisions that drive you crazy. Wouldn't have you any other way. And I get to keep helping rescued shifters, building the refuge we talked about, making sure no one else goes through what you did. That was always the plan. And," she took a breath, "and if I fuck this up, if I get scared and run or push you away because that's what I do when things get real, you don't give up on me. You fight for us, even when I'm not sure I'm worth fighting for." Silas's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Cora, I clawed my way out of hell to get to you. There's nothing you could do that would make me give up on us." "Promise?" "I swear it." He leaned in, his lips brushing hers. "Now stop stalling and accept the bond. I can feel your wolf howling for it. Can feel you fighting what you want because you're scared of being happy." "Maybe I am," Cora admitted. "Maybe I don't know how to be happy without waiting for it to be taken away." "Then I'll teach you." He kissed her properly this time, deep and claiming and absolutely devastating. "Every day, for the rest of our lives. I'll teach you that some things don't get taken away, that some bonds don't break, that you deserve this, deserve us." Cora kissed him back, pouring everything into it, her fear and hope and desperate need to believe him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she knew her decision was made. Had probably been made the moment she'd cut his collar off in her barn and set this whole impossible chain of events in motion. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I accept the bond. I choose you. I choose us." The change was immediate and profound. The mate bond that had been tentative, uncertain, slammed into place with enough force to make them both gasp. Cora felt Silas in her chest, in her blood, in every cell of her body, felt his strength become hers, his power flowing through her in ways that made her Omega nature sing. And she felt his absolute, unwavering certainty that this was right, that they were right. "There's one more thing," Silas said, his voice rough with emotion. "One more condition I need you to agree to." "What?" "When we get back to Lycan territory, when the dust settles and we've dismantled Meridian's entire operation, you let me throw you the biggest damn mating ceremony the shifter world has ever seen. No hiding. No pretending this is anything other than what it is. I want every pack to know that Cora Hastings is my Luna, my mate, my equal." Cora's laugh came out watery, tears streaming down her face even as she smiled. "That sounds terrifying." "Probably." He wiped her tears away gently. "But you'll have me beside you, and Vera and Marcus and Chen and every wolf who survived because you were brave enough to care. We're your pack now, your family, and we don't let our Luna face anything alone." Before Cora could respond, someone cleared their throat from outside the truck. Eli stood there, his expression carefully neutral. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but we've got a situation you need to see." They found Declan on his knees in the dirt, surrounded by wolves from a dozen different packs. His face was bruised. Someone had clearly taken exception to his betrayal, and his hands were still zip-tied behind his back, but it was his expression that made Cora stop. Not defiant, not calculating, just broken. "He's been asking for you," Eli said quietly. "Won't talk to anyone else." Cora approached slowly, Silas a solid presence at her back. "What do you want, Declan?" "To apologize." His voice cracked. "For everything. For not fighting harder 5 years ago. For becoming the kind of monster who'd sell out his own kind for profit. For thinking I could use you to get ahead." He looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, his eyes held genuine remorse. "I destroyed us. Destroyed everything we could have been. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, see what I lost. What I became." "You're right," Cora said flatly. "You don't get forgiveness. You don't get redemption, or a second chance, or any of the things you're clearly hoping for." She crouched down to his level. "But I'll give you something else. A choice." "What kind of choice?" "You cooperate. Tell the Council everything you know about Meridian's operations, every pack that's involved in the trafficking network, every dirty secret you've been keeping. Help us burn it all down." She stood, pulling Silas's arm around her shoulders in a gesture of ownership and partnership. "Or we leave you to the mercy of the packs whose wolves you helped disappear. See how long you last when they find out exactly how deep your betrayal goes." Declan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll talk. I'll tell you everything." "Good." Cora turned away, done with him, done with that chapter of her life. "Eli, make sure he's transferred to Council custody. I want everything documented, everything on record. No backroom deals, no pack politics protecting him." "Consider it done." Eli paused. "Cora? For what it's worth, I'm glad you found your place. You deserve this." She squeezed his arm in thanks, then let Silas lead her away from the site, away from the chaos and the questions and the weight of everything that had happened. They walked into the forest, just the two of them, until the sounds of the operation faded to background noise. Silas pulled her down to sit on a fallen log, his arms wrapping around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "How are you really?" he asked quietly. "Terrified," Cora admitted. "Exhausted. Pretty sure my entire body is one giant bruise. And somehow I'm happy. Is that crazy?" "No." He kissed her temple. "That's called finally letting yourself feel something other than fear. It takes some getting used to." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher through the trees. Around them, the forest was waking up. Birds calling, small animals rustling through underbrush, life continuing despite the violence and chaos that had shaken this mountain. "What happens now?" Cora asked eventually. "Now we go home." Silas's arms tightened around her. "We rebuild, create that refuge we talked about, hunt down every last piece of Meridian's network, and make sure they can never hurt anyone again. He paused. And we figure out how to be mates when neither of us really knows what that looks like. Sounds complicated. Probably. She could hear the smile in his voice. But nothing worth having is ever simple. And you, Cora Hastings, you are absolutely worth every complication, every challenge, every moment of figuring this out together. Cora leaned back against him, letting his warmth seep into her bones, letting herself believe, really believe, that this was real. That she'd found not just a mate but a partner, not just a pack but a family, not just survival but purpose. "I love you," she said softly. "I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you, Silas Montgomery, even though you're bossy and violent and have a truly disturbing number of enemies." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "I love you too, even though you're stubborn and reckless and have a hero complex that's going to give me gray hair. Deal with it. You're stuck with me now. Best deal I ever made." They stayed there until Vera came looking for them, reporting that the council had arrived and wanted statements, until Marcus demanded Silas look at the intelligence they'd recovered from Meridian's computers, until the weight of responsibility called them back to the world. But first, just for a moment, they sat together in the forest and let themselves be simply Cora and Silas. Not Luna and King, not survivors and warriors, just two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. 3 months later, Cora stood in the great hall of the Lycan territories and watched hundreds of wolves from across North America gather for what Silas had promised would be the biggest damn mating ceremony the shifter world had ever seen. He hadn't been kidding. The hall was packed with representatives from every major pack, alphas and betas and omegas, who'd come to witness the Lycan king claim his mate. But they'd also come for something else, to see the Omega who'd helped bring down Meridian Solutions, who'd rallied an army with a phone call, who'd proven that strength came in forms beyond teeth and claws. Cora wore a dress that made her feel both beautiful and ridiculous. White silk that flowed like water, simple enough to not overwhelm her but elegant enough to mark the occasion. Vera had done her hair, Marcus had walked her down the aisle when she'd admitted she had no family to do it, and Chen had stood guard to make sure no one interrupted the ceremony. Her pack, her family, the wolves who'd become hers in every way that mattered. And at the end of that aisle stood Silas, looking devastating in formal black, his silver eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. When she reached him, when he took her hands in his, the bond between them blazed bright enough that she knew everyone in the hall could feel it. "You look terrified," he murmured. "There are hundreds of people watching us," she whispered back. "There are. And every single one of them is about to watch me claim you in front of witnesses. Mark you, make it permanent." His smile was wicked. "Still want to back out?" "Not even a little bit." Cora squeezed his hands. "Do your worst, King Montgomery." "My pleasure, Luna Hastings." The ceremony was beautiful and binding and absolutely perfect. When Silas marked her, his teeth sinking into the junction of her neck and shoulder, claiming her for the entire shifter world to see, Cora felt the bond complete in a way that took her breath away. She was his, he was hers, and nothing would ever change that. The celebration afterward lasted until dawn, wolves from across the territories coming to pay their respects, to congratulate them, to pledge their support for what came next. Because Meridian's fall was just the beginning. There were other organizations, other traffickers, other wolves who needed saving, and Cora and Silas had made it their mission to find every last one of them. But that was tomorrow's war. Tonight, Cora danced with her mate, while their packs celebrated around them. Tonight, she let herself be happy without waiting for it to be taken away. Tonight, she was exactly who she was always meant to be. Not just Silas's Luna, but her own person, strong and scarred and absolutely, perfectly herself. When the last guest finally left and they retreated to their private chambers, Silas pulled her close and whispered against her ear, "Any regrets?" Cora thought about her cabin in the mountains, destroyed but not mourned. Thought about the years she'd spent running, hiding, barely surviving. Thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. "Not a single one," she said honestly. "This, you, us, the pack, everything we're building, this is exactly where I'm meant to be." "Good." He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. Because you're stuck with me now, for better or worse. Probably a lot of worse, knowing our luck. I can handle worse. Cora smiled against his lips. I've survived everything life could throw at me. A little chaos with you is nothing. A little chaos, Silas laughed. That's one way to describe our future. But as they fell into bed together, as the mate bond sang between them with perfect harmony, Cora knew she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not safety, not isolation, not the careful distance that had kept her heart protected but empty. She'd found home, found Pack, found purpose, found love in the most unlikely place, with the most impossible person, in the middle of chaos and violence and everything she'd spent years running from. And for the first time in her entire life, Cora Hastings wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever it was, she wouldn't face it alone. She had Silas, had her wolves, had a future that stretched ahead bright with possibility. The Omega who'd been discarded became the Luna who changed everything. The woman who'd been broken became the queen who remade the rules. And the heart that had been closed for so long finally opened wide enough to let the world in. This was her story. Her triumph. Her proof that sometimes the things that nearly destroy you are exactly what forge you into something stronger. Cora fell asleep in Silas's arms, the mate bond humming contentedly between them, and dreamed of mountains and freedom and all the wolves she'd save tomorrow. But tonight, she was simply home. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.